All right, it looks like we are live. Man, it was an hour, but it was an hour worth waiting for because we are now not live. We're almost live. We're live on a couple pages. Technology. Still live. All right, so we are here live. We finally made it. It is 9:50, just a little bit later than what we had planned to be live or when we planned to be live because things happen. It's technology. It is what it is, but we have a baseball team to talk about. We have MLB playoffs to talk about, an offseason to talk about, and moves that have already been made and been made kind of quickly, but they were good moves to be made. So we're going to get into talking all about that while we are getting ready to do that. I do want to remind you that wherever you're at on social media, make sure that you are following us on Detroit Sports Nation. Follow us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you click that bell on YouTube so that you can get all of the notifications that you need for our content because it's coming at you hard and heavy every day. So make sure that you are following us there. We got baseball. We got playoff baseball, and that's what I want to talk about first because there have been a lot of really, really good games that have taken place so far. I don't know who or what you have been watching, but it has been a phenomenal start to the MLB postseason. Just the energy in the stadiums and the crowd and everything that has been going on and with this October baseball is everything that is good about baseball, and it has been phenomenal. It really has been phenomenal to watch these teams play and compete and really challenge each other. Hopefully you've been able to catch some of the games. I know the Yankees and the Guardians got rained out today, and they're going to play tomorrow at 1 o'clock. But I just kind of want to recap because the last time I was with you guys on the corner when we talked, I kind of gave you predictions for the wild card, and I was wrong about two teams, and I was right about two teams. So I'm batting 500. It's a game of failure. I'll take it, right? Being right 50% of the time usually in life is not good, but when you're talking about baseball, it is good. So we the Guardians ended up playing a phenomenal series with the Tampa Bay Rays, just an incredible pitching matchup series where game 2 was a 15 inning affair where they burned through a ton of pitchers and ultimately ended up closing out the Tampa Bay Rays and then now are taking on the New York Yankees who have had time off. I mean, I think the statistic today was the fact that they were going to be playing one game in 8 days were the New York Yankees. And a lot of times, as we know well in Detroit, given our last few, playoff runs, rest oftentimes leads to rust. And hopefully for Yankees fans and for the Yankees, that is not the case. Hopefully they turned out pretty well in game 1, ended up winning that, take a 1-0 series lead with game 2 being played tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Going over to the other AL wild card, the Seattle Mariners going into Toronto and just dashing all hopes that they may have had about moving on in the playoffs. I think I forget what the exact quote was from Vlad Guerrero Jr., where he said, last year was just a trailer and now this year was going to be the full feature. Well, I guess, Vlad, you're eating your words a little bit, buddy, because this is not a full feature. You guys made an early exit out of the playoffs, and now you guys are golfing while the Seattle Mariners are playing the Houston Astros, and they're playing a great series too. They're down 2-0 after today's game. They're stuck in facing the best team in the American League. That's what they got. The Justin Verlander in game 1, knocked him out before the 5th inning, which does not happen very often this season specifically. And then Yordan Alvarez comes to the plate. And Yordan Alvarez is doing things that have not been seen before, because he is the only player in MLB history to hit a go-ahead home run in the 6th inning or later in back-to-back postseason games. And to think that that's somebody that they acquired, that is incredible. He's a phenomenal bat, just a power guy, just a phenomenal guy to have on your team and in your lineup. And he even made a great play in the outfield during that game as well. So that series is 2-0. Astros probably looking like a sweep, although I would say, and we'll get to this in the predictions here in a little bit, but I think Seattle's going to at least squeak out one win for their fans out there in Seattle. And then, so moving over to the National League, right? I picked the Mets and I picked the Cardinals. Both of them were bad picks. I got the American League teams right. I got the National League teams wrong. And the Cardinals just were lifeless. They ran into a buzzsaw of the Philadelphia Phillies, and it was just nothing they could do about it. When the Phillies are hitting, the Phillies are tough to beat, as the Braves found out in Game 1 as well. And then that Mets-Padres series, the only wild card series to go to 3 games, was a phenomenal series, back and forth, a lot of interaction and a lot of energy and emotion there too as well, especially when Buck Showalter's having the umpires go out and check John Musgrove's ear for sticky stuff and things of that nature. So that series is phenomenal. Now you got the Dodgers and the Padres, and you've got the Braves and the Phillies, which is interesting because you have 2 sets of teams that are very familiar with each other, and it was something that they were even talking about in the Astros and Seattle game today of how familiar these guys, they played each other 19 times this season. There's a lot of familiarity there with them, and it's really one of those things of, okay, how can you set yourself apart? How can you make that play that really puts your team over the top? And right now for the Astros, Yordan Alvarez is doing that. Philadelphia and Atlanta, their series is going to be a dogfight. You got 2 great offenses. Atlanta's at a little bit of a disadvantage because they're stuck with just this pitching conundrum in a lot of ways. And so hopefully they'll be able to iron that out, especially when they're getting into this Game 3. But I'm telling you, that Game 3 in Philadelphia is going to be something that is rocking. The city of Philadelphia right now has got to be just absolutely over their head in emotion with how good their teams are playing right now. And the reason why I say that is because you've got the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the only undefeated team in football, and then you've got the Phillies, who ended the longest playoff drought in Major League Baseball. And trying to collect my thoughts here, it's really interesting to see how this unfolded, right? You had the longest drought being the Seattle Mariners, who ended that this year. Then you also have the next team up was the Phillies, who also ended their drought. So now who's the team that has the longest playoff drought? Well, it's the Angels, and it's the Detroit Tigers, who we're going to talk an awful lot about tonight. Philadelphia and Atlanta, I would not be surprised to see that go 5 games. San Diego and LA, very interesting series, especially with the passion that the Padres are playing with, but then also the skill that the Dodgers play with. Right, the Dodgers are arguably the best team in baseball. Their lineup is tough to face. Their lineup does not swing at balls out of the zone. And when you do throw balls in the zone, they hit the ball hard. And so it's going to be really, really tough for the Padres if they want to have a chance. They split in Los Angeles. They have to, at minimum, Well, I mean, yeah, at minimum, because if they lose both games in San Diego, then they're out. But they've got to find a way to get the series back to LA, 2-2 going to a game 5. Because if not, great run, but it'll be over, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult for them to be able to do that. And so it's fun, right? We got 3 games tomorrow on Friday. You got game 2 of the Cleveland New York Yankees series where Shane Bieber is going to be facing Nestor Cortez, which is going to be a blast watching Nestor Cortez deal and Shane Bieber being one of the best pitchers in the American League. Anyway, and then later on, that game's at 1 o'clock. Later on in the afternoon at 4:30, you've got the Braves and the Phillies, and the Braves don't know who they're pitching. It was to be determined as of this afternoon. Potentially, you're looking at Spencer Strider, but even though he's a rookie and most likely on a innings limit, is going to make that very difficult. Putting that puzzle together of the pitching staff for the Atlanta Braves. And then he's going to be facing off against Aaron Nola, who was just dominant against the New York Mets in the wild card series. And then in the nightcap at 8:30, you got the Dodgers and the Padres. Tony Gonsolin's going to be taking on Blake Snell, which should be a phenomenal matchup. It's going to be a great opportunity for baseball fans to see really good baseball this weekend with these three teams. So I want to move to a prediction of where we're at, and here's kind of where I was. And the last time that I did a show last Thursday, right after the Tigers season ended, was my last show last Thursday, and I told you that it would be a week until we had the corner again, and here we are. In that show, I only predicted the wild card series, and I was 2 for 4, right, batting .500. You take that on your team any day of the week. So let's make a prediction for the divisional rounds, and then once we make that prediction for the divisional rounds, we will go all the way through to the World Series. I'm going to give you my predictions here tonight for the World Series based on what I have seen. So I'm going to say this right off the rip. I think one of the top 2 seeds in the NL will lose. So the Dodgers or the Braves are going to lose this series. If I were to put money on it, and I'm not really a betting man, I would say that it's going to be the Braves. But I wouldn't count out the Padres just yet. They're energetic, and you can kind of see how hungry they are. And Petco Park has not had a playoff series there in 16 years. That place is going to be electric tomorrow night. But let's say, for the sake of, intellectual honesty, I cannot pick the Dodgers to lose 3 out of 5 games. So the Dodgers are moving on, and they're going to take on the Phillies. That's going to be my prediction. I think the Phillies are going to do enough to move on, to hit the ball. I mean, Nick Castellanos, who struggled all year, ends up going 3 for 5, I think, in game 1, and really, really doing a phenomenal job for them in game 1. On the other side of that, right, on the American League side, the Guardians are going to give the Yankees all they can handle. The Guardians are not an easy out. I think that the Guardians could push the Yankees to 5, but I think ultimately the Yankees will win that series. The Guardians have really good defense, and they've got some pretty phenomenal pitching as well. You got Shane Bieber, who's going to be going tomorrow. I would imagine Tristan McKenzie is going to be going the following game that Saturday, because they're going to play 4 games in 4 days. It's going to feel a lot like the regular season for them, which could benefit the Guardians as well, who are a huge momentum team. But I think ultimately the Yankees are going to prevail. And then I think that the Mariners can pull off 1 game in Seattle. I don't think that they're going to be able to sweep the Astros at home. I think that they're going to squeak out 1 win for their fans. I don't think that they'll get swept. I think they win game 3, lose game 4, and the Astros head to the ALCS. Now, in the Yankees-Astros series, it's going to be a dogfight. But throughout the regular season, the Astros were the better team. They were the team that just continually were a pain in the side of the New York Yankees. And I can't imagine that changes. So while it is taking chalk, I think that it's important to take chalk in situations like this. I think the Yankees come up short, and I think the Astros head to their um, their the World Series. And then as far as the NL goes, there's no way that the Phillies, I think, could hang with the Dodgers. And so I think that you're going to have a Houston LA matchup, right? It's almost like college football at that point, with seeing the same teams over and over and over again. But it is what it is. I mean, that's just the way that these teams have been built. I mean, these are very good teams. So with the Houston and LA matchup, I've got to lean towards the Dodgers. I don't know why. I think the Dodgers have probably the best team all around. They have a great offense. They have a really good pitching staff, and so if I were to take them head to head with the Astros, I think ultimately the Dodgers will win that series, and they'll be your 2022 champs. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But I was 500 in the wild card. Let's see if I can bet a little bit better than that moving into this offseason. And this is kind of the way that I wanted to structure these offseason shows, is to talk about an offseason blueprint for the Detroit Tigers. I know I got one comment here from Facebook, and I do want to remind you that while we are live, make sure that you're commenting. Make sure that you drop questions, thoughts, concerns, whatever, well wishes into the comments so that we can talk baseball, because that's what we're here for. I know it's late. I know there's an NFL football game on, but listen, it's the Commanders versus the Bears. Nobody cares about that game, right? So let's talk baseball, because there's no better sport to talk about on a Thursday night at 10 o'clock. But we're talking about an offseason blueprint for the Detroit Tigers. And I've got a comment here from John Thomas Butler, who says, who's the one pitcher who is still in it that you would want on your team all the way to the end, and what batter? So talking about the playoffs, if there was one hitter that I wanted on my team all the way to the end, man, that's a tough one. But I would say, I think right now it would have to be Yordan Alvarez with the way that he's swinging the bat. He's just so good. So good. One pitcher that I would want on my team, Louise Castillo, no doubt about it. He threw for Seattle today, pitched really well. Just a crafty right-hander with insane arm side run, high 90s fastball. That's the kind of guy that you want forefronting your pitching rotation. And so that would be my answer, John. I appreciate the question. I do want to remind you again, just make sure that you're getting your questions and thoughts into the comments so we can chat. But let's talk about the Detroit Tigers, and let's talk about their offseason blueprint, okay? They've already made some moves of significant importance. Would be the fact that they've let their scouting director go. They've fired Scott Coolball. They have reassigned Mike Hessman and Ramon Santiago to the minor leagues, which means that they're looking for a new hitting coach. They're looking for a new scouting director, a new third base coach, and assistant hitting director at the major league level. Hessman and Santiago are moving into player development roles, which I think are good for them. But Scott Harris is putting his fingerprints all over this right from the get-go, and it's good to see. So when we specifically talk about the Tigers' offseason, it has to start with the discussion about their roster, because right now their 40-man roster is a mess. It's an absolute, well, I don't want to say it's a mess, but it is, because on their 40-man roster, 5 days after the World Series, they're going to have 49 players. And so mid-November, about 2 weeks after the World Series ends, maybe even a week after the World Series ends, they're going to have to at minimum, remove 9 players from their roster. Now, a long time ago, Al Avila said that was the hope, right? That you would have so many guys in your system that you just would hate to see go. But when I read some of these names to you, you're going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. He should go. And if we don't get him back, we don't get him back. Because this rebuild did not go the way that we expected it to go. So currently on their 40-man roster, they have 49 players. There are 40 players that are healthy and 9 players that are on the 60-day IL. Those 60-day IL guys will come back on the roster 5 days after the World Series. Also, 5 days after the World Series, guys that are free agents will fall off the roster. So, in that scenario, you have Tucker Barnhart, who won't be on the roster, and Daniel Norris, who won't be on the roster. So, that takes 49 down to 47. There is the possibility that Andrew Chafin could not pick up his $7 million player option, but I think he will. So we're going to stick with the 47 number. If it's 46, it's 46, but it's not going to be lower than 46. So we have to find a way to minimize this roster down to 40 players at most, but early in December is going to be the Rule 5 draft. Prospects that are not protected by the 40-man roster who have been in systems for a while are eligible for the Rule 5 draft. We have our own guys. We're going to get into that as well. If you want the opportunity to draft in the Rule 5 draft, you have to have an open 40-man spot, or you would have to DFA somebody at that point. So, I'm going to present this tonight in the sense that we're going to get down to 39 players. So we're actually going to cut down about 8, 10 players, okay? And here's why. We're actually going to cut 10 players from the roster that I think could go and we wouldn't miss them because we have prospects that we need to protect in the Rule 5 draft and by adding them to the 40-man roster. We're going to talk about those guys too. So at the end of the day, when we get done with this video tonight, this live stream tonight, this conversation tonight, we are going to be at 39 players on the 40-man roster. That's the plan. So who are the non-tender candidates? Because what's happening right now, and if I had a way to show it to you, I would, but the Tigers really right now have a ton of guys that are just in team control or arbitration. Most of them are arbitration eligible. There are 12 guys, I believe it is, that have... There are 12 guys that are arbitration eligible, which means that the Tigers have the choice to offer them an arbitration offer, or they're going to non-tender them a contract. They can also non-tender guys that are under team control. And so here's who's looking at arbitration. According to MLB trade rumors, Drew Hutchinson was at the top of the list. He's already been removed off the roster. Joe Jimenez, and he's projected to make $2.6 million next year. Jeimer Candelario projected to make $7 million in arbitration. Jose Cisnero projected to make $2.2 million. Victor Reyes, $2.2 million. Austin Meadows, who we didn't see much of this year, projected to make $4 million. Harold Castro, $2.6 million. Gregory Soto, $3.1 million. That's significant. We'll talk about it. Tyler Alexander, $1.6 million. Willie Castro, $1.7 million. Ronnie Garcia, $1 million. And then Kyle Funkhauser, who is also dealing with injury, at about $800K. So the question becomes, who do we not offer a contract to? And while we're doing this, let me pull up the Tigers 40-man roster, okay? And I'll share my screen and I'll get that on the screen for us so that you can also see what I'm talking about when we talk about these guys. So let me pull that up, and I'm going to actually switch these right here, make this full screen so that you can see it. But the Tigers 40-man roster right now includes 49 guys, okay? It's from MLB.com. Those 9 guys on the 60-day DL, you can see right here, that while they're not officially part of the 40-man roster during the season, they're included here on this tab. 5 days after the season, they will come back onto the roster. So they'll have to get down to 40 players. So to start, here's the deal. And I know that this is going to kind of be painful, but when we're talking about a rebuild, and when we are talking about a situation where we have to make decisions, okay? There are going to be some names that you've become very familiar with that are going to be no longer here next year. Some you may be like, oh, well, I really liked him. Well, sometimes you got to just make room. So when I say some of these names tonight, just understand that that's kind of the premise that I'm working from. Because some of these guys I don't want to see go. But I know that our team will be better if they do go. Also, along those lines, the framework that we're working from, okay? The framework that we're working from comes from Scott Harris's philosophy, right? Young players, being able to keep young players, being able to develop young players. He said this in his press conference. But then also dominating the strike zone, which is going to come into play significantly when we talk about some of these guys, okay? So, number one name on the list who I'm non-tendering a contract to and removing him from my 40-man roster, Jeimer Candelario. You might say, why Jeimer Candelario? Well, because Jeimer Candelario, over 162 game average, looks like a decent hitter. 240, 18 home runs, 66 RBIs, 76 hits, 34 doubles, okay? Decent. He lacks defensively. He's not athletic. He struggles to move. And he's going to be paid $7 million. He is also older. He's going to be turning 29 in November. That doesn't fit the mold of young, developable, if that's even a word. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is what it is, right? I said it. We don't know. He's 29. I'm cutting, non-tendering Candelario. Now, if nobody picks him up through the waiver process, nobody offers him a contract, I might bring him back on a minor league deal with an invitation to spring training, make him prove himself to us. But he's 29 years old. It's time to move on from Candelario. Another name that's on the 40-man roster, and I just want to make sure that you can see this as well, but another name that's on the 40-man roster is Josh Lester. He came up for the series, or he came up when Miguel got hurt and went on the DL later in the season, but I'm getting rid of Josh Lester. Sorry about that. I'm getting rid of Josh Lester. He's older as well. There's no reason. I mean, he's blocked by Torkelson. He's not going to take Torkelson's spot. He doesn't need to be on the 40-man. We need space on the 40-man. We use Josh Lester as a, sacrificial lamb in a lot of ways. And remember, if nobody picks these guys up, they can always come back and be part of the minor league system. So they could end up back in the system if it was something that we wanted them to be in. All right, next name on the list, number 3, Brian Garcia. He's made a great start in Seattle, did a really good job starting towards the end of the season, even though he hadn't started a game since high school. But he's 27 years old. There's not really a spot for him unless you feel like you absolutely need the arms, then you would keep him. But at the end of the day, there's just no space right now. There's no space. So you let him go, but he's one of the ones that you just hope no one claims, nobody signs, and you bring him back. Number 4 on the list, former Rule 5 draft pick, Victor Reyes, who's 27 years old. Switch hitter, outfielder. Zips on Fangraph has him projected as a double-digit home run guy, but over his 5 years in the major league, he's hit a total of 16 home runs, an average of 3 a year. It's a big body, 6'4" frame, but beats the ball into the ground. Very shaky on defense. Not something that you really want when you're trying to get strong defensively and more athletic. Now, he's another guy, though, that you would want to potentially bring back. He did hit 300 in 2020. Shortened season, I get that. Oh, he hit 277 in 2020. I'm sorry, he hit 300 in 2019. But again, average is a starting point. What do the advanced metrics say? They're not great. Weighted runs created. He's below league average in weighted runs created. Below average in weighted on base average. Just not a guy, especially when Carpenter came up and was a bit of a surprise. Is that sustainable? We don't know, but I'd like to find out. Akil Baddoo is still only 23 years old. He's still young enough to be somebody that can develop. And then you got Cody Clemens, who potentially, but we're going down the list here. Okay? Victor Reyes would be number 4, who I'd remove off of the roster. Number 5, Zach Short. He's just a plug-and-play guy for when guys get injured. You can take him off. He doesn't do anything with the bat. He's okay defensively, but he's like Josh Lester with Kreidler and Baez now and other potential kids that are better in the system. No reason to keep Zach Short on your 40-man roster. Jose Cisnero, an arbitration-eligible guy. $2.2 million, I think, was the number. That's a guy that you can get rid of. He's old. 27, 28 years old. You can move on. And I understand the need for pitching. I get that. But at the end of the day, you got to move on. You've got to, create space for this 40-man roster. Daz Cameron. Daz Cameron's another guy that I would remove from the 40-man. The outfield is crowded. When you talk about Austin Meadows, you talk about Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Akil Baddoo, Reyes, Cameron, and the next guy that we're going to mention, Willie Castro, so we might as well say it now. There's not a lot of room for these guys. So to have them taking a spot on the 40-man right now is not going to work out. Now, do you hope that you could eventually get him, back into your system? Yeah, probably, because truth be told, Daz Cameron's not gotten long enough run to have a shot. But he's taking a spot right now. And I think that the organization's a little bit higher on Kerry Carpenter than they are on Daz Cameron. Willie Castro's the next guy. We already mentioned him. But we talk about commanding that strike zone. He has a 4% walk rate in 2020. Walked 4% of his at-bats. Struck out 24% of his at-bats. That's problematic. That's not good, man. He's also 27 years old. Or he's 25. I'm sorry, he's 25. He's not 27. But I think we know what we get with Willie. He's okay defensively at a number of different positions, not great at any of them. It's a crowded outfield. Probably can cut bait. Another one that you want, back in your system potentially. The next guy I cut, number 9, is Louise Castillo. Older arm, made his debut this year. Don't need him. Get rid of him. Off the 40-man. And then we come to the final guy, number 10. And it's interesting because there's a reason, there's a method to the madness, right? But if we've cut those first 9 people, knowing that we need to protect 2 prospects specifically, right now our roster would be at 38 players. So you could protect those 2 prospects and not participate in the Rule 5. I doubt that's the way that Scott Harris will go. Or you cut a 10th person and get into the Rule 5. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but I believe it. I don't know. I doubt it will happen, but if I were the GM, I think I would do it. And I could be crazy for this. But the 10th person that I would cut is Gregory Soto. Yes, he throws the ball a million miles an hour from the left side. Yes, he was your closer this year. But when you have a 12% walk rate, that's not winning and conquering the strike zone. He would be a name that I would throw out there. He's arbitration eligible, projected at $3.1 million next year. And in the next part, next week when I talk about who these guys should sign, what the Tigers should do with some of these guys that they should sign, and potentially who they could go after, like potential free agents, I'll make a case even more as to why Gregory Soto could go. He might be the third, fourth best bullpen option that you have. Behind Jimenez, behind Lang, behind Foley. Do you need to pay him $3.1 million? Knowing that arbitration number is going to go higher as you keep him on your roster? I would cut him. I'd get down to 37 players on the roster so that I could then protect 2 prospects for the Rule 5. Specifically Reese Olson, who's a right-handed pitcher, and Parker Meadows, who's an outfielder who came on. If you listen to my interview with Lynn Henning, he said that he's somebody that has come on quite strong this season, and is somebody to definitely keep your eye on, specifically, during this offseason. So that's what I would do. That would be my blueprint for the Detroit Tigers this offseason, starting with the non-tender candidates. I would get rid of those 10 players. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. I would love to know what you guys are thinking as far as who you would keep on this team and what you would do with them. But you got a little bit of a roster problem. 49 players that you got to get down to 40. There's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. We already know that one of those 40 guys is going to be Miguel Cabrera, which, as I've said on previous shows, is a good move by the Tigers. Definitely something that they should do to honor a guy that, has played the majority of his career here, collected many milestones. You don't send somebody out to pasture like that. You just don't do it for a number of reasons. But those are the guys that I would take. I would cut Soto. I would cut Castillo. I'd cut Willie Castro, Daz Cameron, Zach Short, Victor Reyes, Brian Garcia, Josh Lester, and Candelario. And I would roll with an outfield of Green, Meadows if he's healthy, Baddoo, and Carpenter. And if Baddoo struggles, you option him to AAA. Give your next guy up a shot. Or you look to find, AJ had mentioned getting more right-handed in the outfield. There could be some names out there, but we're going to get into free agency next week and some signings that I think that Scott Harris couldn't make that would make this team more competitive in a short turnaround. But moving on from guys like Candelario and Willie Castro and guys like that is not necessarily a bad thing. Look, we like them, right? They can tend to be like Candelario was my guy the moment he got traded. I liked the way that he profiled. It didn't necessarily translate to Comerica Park the way that I thought that it would. And I don't necessarily want to see him go. But at the end of the day, if it's better for the Tigers, it's better for the Tigers. So that's been Offseason Blueprint Part 1. I will be writing articles on this, so make sure that you're checking those out on Detroit Sports Nation. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you're able to tune into the playoffs and I will be back next Thursday night, hopefully with less technical difficulties and able to interact with you guys a lot more next week. But I appreciate those of you that have been around. Do not forget that while you are here, make sure that you're following and hitting those subscribe buttons on all social media platforms, because if you want Detroit sports content, you want to get it from Detroit Sports Nation, because we cover everything. Until next Thursday, I am AJ Reilly. This has been The Corner, and as always, go Tigers.